Good morning, everyone. I am Sarah, and together with Dave Nathaniel, Clarizzanelle, Mary Rose, we're going to present to you today global culture and cultural flows. So, for our presentation outline, we're going to discuss about cultural differentialism, cultural convergence, cultural hybridization, world culture McDonaldization, and globalization of nothing. For our objectives, it is to understand global flows of culture, to consider three or more theories of globalization, particularly how they relate to cultural flows, cultural differentialism, cultural hybridization, and cultural convergence. And lastly, to consider differences in how and where these flows move and the barriers to them. For our first topic, which is cultural differentialism, let's call Miss Mary to present this to us.
Thank you, Miss Sarah, for the introduction. We will start by discussing what is cultural differentialism. These are cultures tend to remain stubbornly different from one another. This theory argues that there are lasting differences among and between cultures and is linked to Samuel Huntington's notion of the clash of civilizations. This viewpoint generally acknowledges localization, language, and religious distinctions, and views cultural differences as unchangeable and largely unaffected by globalization. Cultures are seen as basically closed not only to global process but also tap the influences of another cultures. According to George Ritzer, the world is envisioned as a mosaic of largely separate cultures. It is like a billiard balls, where the balls represents cultures seen as bouncing off others representing countries. Examples are formalities and religion, where greetings from Korea is different from greetings in the United States, and of course the differences in religion. One of the things that are under cultural differentialism are civilizations. A controversial example of this is Huntington's Clash of Civilizations, which will be discussed later on. Huntington uses the term civilization to describe lo- to describe the broadest level of culture and cultural identities. What he sees is the emergence of fault lines among and between these civilizations. Moving on to Samuel Huntington's class of civilization, to begin his argument, Huntington refutes past paradigms that have been ineffective in explaining or predicting the reality of the global political order. He said that we need a map that both portrays reality and simplifies reality in a way that best serves our purposes. So Huntington develops a new civilization paradigm to create a new understanding of the post-Cold War order and to fill the gaps of the already existing paradigm. To begin with, Huntington divides the world into nine major civilizations: the Cynic, Japanese, Hindu, Islamic, Orthodox, Western European, North American, Latin American, and African. Moving on, Huntington also offers a three modern grand narrative of the relationship among civilizations. For more than 3,000 years, civilization tended to be wildly separated in both time and space. As a result, contacts among them were up to be almost non-existent. The contacts that did occur tend to be limited or intermittent, but when they occurred, they were likely to be quite intense. The next phase, roughly from 1500 to the close of World War II, was characterized by the sustained, overpowering, and unidirectional impact of Western civilization on all other civilizations. Huntington attributes this to various structural characteristics of the rise of cities, commerce, state bureaucracy, and of the emerging sense of national consciousness. However, the most immediate cause was technological, especially in ocean navigation and military. This includes a superior military organization, discipline and training, and of course, weaponry. In the end, the West excelled in organized violence, and while those in the West sometimes forget this, those in other part of the world does not. The third phase, the multi-civilization, is traceable to the end of the expansion of the West and the beginning of the revolt against it. The period after World War II and until about 1990 was characterized by clash of ideas, especially capitalist and communist ideologies. But with the fall of communism, the major clashes in the world come to revolve around religion, culture, and ultimately civilization. Moving on to discuss cultural hybridization, may I introduce Miss Sarah Pineda.
Cultural hybridization. Cultural hybridization and globalization are two terms that refer to the process or actions of merging local culture with foreign culture through economic endeavor and making adaptations to meet cultural norms of adopted destination. So this would be the example of hybridization, cultural hybridization. We know na this K-pop groups like Blackpink, Girls' Generation, and BTS, they use English uh, as their lyrics, as the language in their lyrics. Not just Korean or Hangul, but also English. So mixed siya. So that other people from foreign countries could also understand their songs. So cultural hybridization and related concepts. We have localization, hybridization, and creolization. So mamaya-maya, iisa-isahin natin ang mga yan. Unahin natin ang glocalization. Glocalization enables international brands and enterprises to penetrate local markets and expand their sales boundaries. Similarly, any idea or concept can receive worldwide attention if it is adopted in a way that is acceptable to local audience. It would promote cultural inclusiveness and raise living standards. So there are brands or companies na gusto nilang mag-business sa ibang regions. So in that way, para maabot nila yung iba't ibang local areas or mga tao, knowing na may iba't iba tayong cultures, kailangan nilang alamin yung culture ng mga tao so that they could get in touch with them. So yung global companies, they need to adopt yung local culture ng different areas. Glocalization is more specific and includes modifying goods or services to match the expectations of the local culture. Gaya nga ng nabanggit kanina, pag sinabing glocalization, globally and locally. So for example, if the company has goods or services that they offer, it needs to match the expectation of local culture. So for example, yung business mo, medyo i-alter mo siya para mag-fit in sa culture ng area kung saan mo itatayo yung business mo. So ayan, pag globalization, it is the distribution of ideas and products. While glocalization, ini-incorporate mo na yung global concepts mo to the local or regional needs. So localization, yung ideas, concepts, and products that are made for local customer needs. Doon mo natitingnan yung mga needs ng mga tao sa local areas na gusto mo pagtayuan ng business. So for glocalization, there are actually 3 brands or companies known to successfully use this principle. So we have Coca-Cola, Disney, and McDonald's. So let's discuss first the Walt Disney Company. So it is a prominent example of a brand that has successfully successfully implemented glocalization strategy. Majority ng kita ng Disney ay na-generate niya from its theme parks. So, minsan may mga kakilala tayo, they wanted to go to Hong Kong. Why? Because they want to experience to go to Disneyland. So we have local parks, theme parks here, pero minsan mas gusto nilang ma-experience yung Disneyland. From theme parks to movies, to merchandising, to their new app, Disney Plus. So ang Walt Disney Company, hindi lang siya nagstay sa business niya na theme parks, so then they innovated into new streaming application, which is Disney Plus. So throughout the company's history, they have made wise acquisitions and innovative ventures. Nag-innovate sila para mas maabot yung iba't ibang tao globally. So it allowed them to become much more than just a theme park. So each park has a featured castle. So makikita natin yung Sleeping Beauty Castle na matatagpuan lamang sa Disneyland Paris. So unique siya sa Disneyland Paris only. And then here are the examples of different Disneylands in different regions. So in China, we have Disneyland Shanghai, in USA, Disneyland California, and in France, Disneyland Paris. Makikita natin na iba't ibang Disneyland ay merong iba't ibang structures, yung pagkakagawa, yung designs nila. So next one, finally, the theme parks include diverse versions of standard rides as well. Iba-iba rin yung mga rides specific sa bawat region. For example, meron silang segment na Sinbad's Storybook Village at Tokyo Disney Sea. So yan ay unique lamang sa Disneyland Tokyo. And then merchandise, events, food, and drinks, as well as the rituals performed at each park are all adapted to the local culture. Another example is the Feng Shui na alam natin di sina-celebrate or isa sa mga tradition ng mga Chinese. So yan, yung segment na yan ay makikita lang sa Hong Kong Disneyland. So we have here Disney Princesses, yung Encanto movie, and Disney Pixar Lightyear. Yan yung mga isa sa mga movies or mga films ng Disney. And then if you have the Disney Plus channel or app, if you are subscribing to this, and then mas madaming maaabot yung company na to. Not just Filipinos, but different people across the globe. Then we have here Coca-Cola. So this has long been acknowledged as one of the world's most valuable brands. This has been accomplished through product diversity and effective marketing strategies. So Coca-Cola Company sells a variety of products in various parts of the world. So in Mexico, they have the Barilitos Aguas Frescas. In France, they have Coca-Cola Light Sana. New Zealand, Coca-Cola Raspberry. In Japan, they have Citra. In Romania, they have Coca-Cola Lime. In Australia and New Zealand, they have Coca-Cola Ginger. So next one, McDonald's. So itong McDonald's na fast food chain na to, alam natin mga Pilipino, it's very popular sa atin. So whenever we eat out with friends, with the families, this is one of the options that we have. And McDonald's is often regarded as one of the most successful examples of glocalization because of its rapid and expansion. Mabilis yung pagdami ng mga branches, not just in the Philippines, in the US, but across other nations na din. So it has become one of the world's largest fast food chains. So dati nag-start lang sila as a speedy service system. Nagbebenta sila ng 15-cent hamburgers. But now it has expanded into a fast food empire with over 36,000 branches in over 100 countries. Ayan, some of the products of McDonald's. They sell burgers, ice cream, sundaes, coffee, French fries, and many more. So, para maabot ang iba't ibang tao in different regions. So they had adapted to local cuisines and provided locals with the foods they desired at a reasonable price. Here are some examples. So in India, they have veggie pizza makpav. In Thailand, they have samurai pork burger. And in Japan, they have the shaka chiki red pepper chicken. And next one, they also have mozzarella dippers in UK. In Korea, they have shrimp burger. And in Canada, they have the protein. So next, we have Greek mac, which is found in Greece. Unique siya sa McDonald's in Greece and Mock Crockett sa Netherlands naman yan. So we're gonna discuss about hybridization, which is a related concept in cultural hybridization. So this one is external flows that interact with internal flows, resulting in a one-of-a-kind or unique culture hybrid that blends their elements. So pinagsama siya. One good example is this pork chow fan, but this one is a Filipino style. So we know that chow fan originated from the Sui dynasty in China. Pero ngayon, nag-evolve na siya into different regions of the world. May kanya-kanya na tayong style. Like for example, this one is a Filipino style pork chow fan. The next one, Creolization, convergence of languages and cultures previously unintelligible to one another. So pinagsamang languages. One good example is the Chavacano, or the Philippine Creole. Spanish is a Spanish-based Creole spoken in the parts of the Philippines, especially in and around the city of Zamboanga by over 600,000 people. There are also speakers of the Zamboanga dialect of Chavacano in Zamfara, Malaysia. It is the only Spanish-based Creole in Asia and the only non-Austronesian language to have developed in the Philippines. So Chavacano combines vocabulary mainly from Spanish with grammar mainly from Tagalog and Cebuano. There are two main varieties of Chavacano in Zamboanga. The first one would be the formal variety. It contains more Spanish vocabulary. Second one would be the informal variety, containing more vocabulary from Tagalog, Cebuano, and other Philippine languages. So here is the example of Chavacano alphabet and the pronunciation as seen on the picture. So the next one, we're gonna discuss this 5 scapes of globalization. So as previously mentioned, globalization, it refers to the increasing speed and breadth of interactions interconnecting the globe. So si Arjun Appadurai, isa siyang anthropologist, and he has described this in terms of the 5 distinct scapes or flows ng globalization. So meron tayong ethnoscapes, technoscapes, ideascapes, financescapes, and mediascapes. So understanding of globalization in terms of the people, goods, and ideas that cross national borders provide us a useful framework para maintindihan yung dynamic social landscapes kung saan yung modern individuals ay madalas embedded sa kanilang araw-araw na buhay. Itong framework na to, pwede nating masagot yung mga katanungan like, saan ba nagmamigrate yung mga tao? Bakit sila nagmamigrate? How fast they travel? How their lives change as a result of their travels? And how their original communities alter and can all be addressed. So isa-isahin natin ang 5 scapes of globalization. Ethnoscape, ito yung flow ng people across boundaries. So kapag may mga leisure travelers, like gusto lang mamasyal, kaya nag-travel sila across the world. This is one example. If it's not for leisure travelers, or hindi siya about sa leisure activities, pwede rin namang sa work, labor migrants, or kapag refugees. So according to World Trade Organization, a specialist branch of the UN, tourism is one of the fastest expanding commercial industries, with 1 out of every 11 employment being tied to tourism in some manner. So tourism often brings people from established areas of the globe into touch with people from developing parts of the world. So for example, merong nag-travel, mostly kapag daw nagta-travel according to WTO, developed countries get in touch with developed or developing countries pa lamang. So some, kapag nagta-travel sila, they are coming from developed countries, naghanap sila ng service from people like the Philippines na third world country. And some naman, nagka-travel sila and ina-expect nila na servants yung mga tao kung saan sila pupunta. So they are like expecting servants kung saan sila pupunta. Especially if third world country ang pupuntahan nila. So it engages more interaction from different people around the world. Then we have technoscape, flows of technology. One good example is yung Apple, yung iPhone. Alam naman natin na yan ay sikat na sikat. And it has a significant impact on people's lives all along the commodity chain. So sa bawat release ng iPhone, ng bagong model, like for example, the iPhone 14, no? Sales records are broken with lines of buyers spilling out of Apple stores and running around the block. So demand for this new product accelerates as a fast pace of manufacture. Next would be ideoscape, refers to the flows of ideas. Every time you have something to share on Facebook for public consumption, this is one good example for bigger is na they travel around the world, different areas to disseminate their theological ideas. Next, financescape. This would be the flow of money across political borders. This already happened before. And next one would be mediascape. So flow of media across borders. Before we just have the telegram. Actually, before we don't even have telegram or Morse code. And then it was developed, it was used during the time of Titanic when it was about to shrink. Yan yung ginamit nila. And then telephone was discovered. So from telegraph, naging siyang telephone. And now we have the internet. So the internet, it has helped us to disseminate information. It's the flow of media. And the media has become much more simpler and quickly exchanged across geographic boundaries. So next one would be the mediascape. Brazilian telenovelas, for example, may give us enjoyment on long-distance African bus excursions. So kahit sa mga African bus, pinapalabas yung mga Brazilian telenovelas, yung mga telenovelas ng iba't ibang bansa. Another example, yung mga Bollywood, napapalabas din yan sa mga theaters sa Canada. And next one, mediascape. Another example, kapag nanonood tayo ng mga World Cup, mga Olympics. So that's one example. And so to discuss cultural convergence, let's now call Mr. Dave Nathaniel to discuss this.
Thank you, Ms. Sarah. And now let's move on for the cultural convergence. Imagine you are on an adventurous vacation in a faraway country. You've taken 3 flights and 2 buses, and you've been traveling for a combined 36 hours. You walk the final kilometer to your guest house and nearly collapse from exhaustion in your room. In the next morning, you wake up to your host listening to an NBA game on the radio as he goes about his morning chores. He gives you direction in English to the nearest shop where you buy Nescafe instant coffee, Lay's potato chips, and a Snicker bar to snack on back in your room. Although you have traveled very far from the United States, you are still able to find many of the familiar sights, sounds, and tastes at home. This common scenario illustrates the meaning of cultural convergence. Cultural convergence is when 2 or more cultures influence each other and become similar with increased contact. The art, customs, ideologies, and sometimes language of convergent cultures influence each other. The term cultural convergence refers to the tendency of cultures to change and adapt to frequent exposure to other cultures. The more cultures are in contact with each other, the more similar they will be. The time and the instances of contact are the two main factors affecting cultural convergence. The rate of convergence is increased with higher instances of contact, ease of communication and transportation, and participation in the same organization. If a culture is only exposed to the other culture through occasional appearance in pop culture media, it will be slower to adapt the customs of that culture than if they're exposed to their food, language, art, and so on a daily basis. The higher the levels of interaction, the faster and more thoroughly cultures will converge, becoming more alike in their behaviors, ideologies, art, and so on. Imperialism. It is repressed when one culture imposes itself more or less consciously and tends to destroy at least part of another culture. Countries may have their own language and culture, but cultural imperialism pushes them to adopt cultural attitudes and values from somewhere else. Cultural imperialism affects lifestyles, food habits, dressing, language, and festivals. Pakistan is one of those developing countries which suffers from cultural invasion due to the foreign channels on satellite transmission and cable TV network. For example, American cultural imperialism would be the expansion of the Disney brand in foreign nations. Since its establishment in the United States, Disney has now expanded to locations such as Latin America, the Middle East, Russia, India, and China. Some example of cultural imperialism would be Aladdin, The Little Mermaid, Encanto, Mulan, and Pocahontas. For the next topic, it will be presented by Ms. Clarizzanelle de Vera.
Thank you, Dave. Now we will discuss about the world culture. World culture, it includes the spread of global models that leads to global convergence. Ito daw yung paglaganap ng global models na nagli-lead ng global convergence. Ang global convergence ay yung process ng geographically distant cultures that influences one another kahit na nasa magkaibang lugar or even if the distance physically separates them. Sa world culture, we are able to witness a paradigm shift dahil sa mga global models natin today. Ang resulta ng world culture is the isomorphism. Ito yung belief na ang widespread adoption sa series of standardized cultural models ay nagre-resulta sa greater global uniformity. Example nito ay ang mga models employed by organizations, mga corporations with global reach in domains gaya ng education, yan, education sa ibang bansa, education sa Philippines, business, politics, religions, and so on. So, according kay Richer, these things tend not to be imposed on people, institutions, or societies, but rather are more likely to be welcomed by them. So, kumbaga, nanonormalize na lang na sa buong mundo, dapat may education, dapat may politics, dapat may religion, ganun. Thus, globalization, in their view, tends to be seen as something legitimate rather than as something that is imposed on people illegitimately. People tend to feel increasingly part of, included, or a global culture. While global culture can be constraining, the emphasis in this approach is on how that culture is enabling, how it permits people to self-actualize. Next is McDonaldization. Ito naman yung process by which principles of the fast food restaurants are coming to dominate more and more sectors of American society as well as the world. It is a byproduct of Americanization or Westernization, which is a part of the wider phenomenon of globalization. So, next slide, please. The McDonald's was a simple hamburger shop before, but now we can see It is all over the internet because it is now a global phenomenon. So we have here the 5 dimensions of McDonaldization. Next slide, please. First is the efficiency. It means the choosing of means to reach a specific and rapidly with the least amount of cost or effort. Here, the idea is specific to the interest of the industry or business. Pero typically, kumbaga, ang pinapakita nila ay magbe-benefit ito sa customer. Examples, yung nag-drive-up window, yung salad bars, fill your own cup, paki-click, self-serve gasoline, and etc. Yan. Ang interesting pa dito is that kadalasan yung customer na yung gumagalaw ng work o gumagawa ng work na dati ay siniserve lang para sa kanila. And here, the customer pays for the privilege. So next is the calculability. According to Richer, this involves an emphasis on things that can be calculated, counted, and quantified. Quantification refers to a tendency to emphasize quantity rather than quality. This leads to a sense that quality is equal to certain, usually but not always, large quantity things. So, tignan natin yung mga examples. Example nito ay mga element na nag-include ng Big Mac, the Whopper, or yan, kailangan calculated siya lahat. And another manifestation relates to time quicker is better. Lose weight fast, microwaving allows for spending less time in the kitchen and in news reporting. Yeah. Next is the predictability. Predictability refers to the attempt to structure our environment so that surprise and differentness ay maging sakto pa rin upon our sensibilities. Yan. Rational people need to know what to expect and they want to be sure that the fun, satisfaction, taste, and benefits ay nare-receive. Next is the control. In control, it means to exert increasing control over both employees and customers. Dito raw, everything is prepackaged, pre-measured, automatically controlled. Kumbaga, the human employee is not required to think, just follow the instruction and push a button now and then. Kumbaga, ready na lahat. At home, our ovens and probes tell us when our food is done. Parang lahat ay computerized na. And yung employees, hindi na nila kailangan mag-work ng as in because pre-packaged na yung mga food na kailangan nilang i-serve. And also sa mga supermarkets, checkers at the supermarket don't have to think either. Ni-scan na lang nila yung code, hindi na nila kailangan i-calculate. Next is the irrationality of rationality. According to Richer, most specifically, irrationality means that rational systems are unreasonable systems. By that, I mean that they deny the basic humanity, the human reason of the people who work within or are served by them. Although there have been many benefits and conveniences that are related to this process of McDonaldization, variety, round-the-clock banking, and shopping, and often speedier service, there is a certain sense that these rational systems tend to turn in on themselves to lead to irrational outcomes. So next is, let's proceed to globalization of nothing. Ano nga ba yung globalization of nothing? When we say globalization of nothing, next please, we do not argue that globalization is literally nothing because it is clear na malaki ang kahalagahan nito. This argument is using a term borrowed from Weber, that there is an elective affinity between globalization and nothing. That is, one does not cause the other, but they do tend to vary together. Hindi niya sinasabi na ang globalization ay nagkakos ng nothing or ang nothing ang nagkakos ng globalization, but they provide a different meaning when they are put together. By nothing, we mean largely empty forms that are centrally conceived and controlled and relatively devoid of distinctive content. Conversely, something is defined here. Next. Something is defined here as largely full forms that are indigenously conceived and controlled and relatively distinct content. Thus, sinasabi rito na mas madaling i-export yung mga empty forms or yung nothing throughout the globe kesa sa mga forms na loaded with content or yung something. So, globalization, ito yung imperialistic ambitions of nation-states, corporation, and organization and their imposition throughout the world. So, nothing, kagaya ng sinabi kanina, social forms largely devoid of any distinctive content, including non-places, non-things, non-people, non-services. That's why we have the ATM cards, the GCash, kahit wala na tayong dala-dalang cash, we can pay via online banking. And something large, fully social firms, those rich in distinctive content. So, yan. So, let's summarize. We have finally discussed about the cultural flows around the globe in which it moves easily around the world than ever before digital technology. And we also learned about the relationship between flows and barriers that are seen to result in differentialism, hybridization, or convergence. That's it. Thank you so much for listening.